A modern Hasidic tale imagines a parent lovingly talking to their child. Do you remember, mein Kind, those scribes from the old country who would travel around to each little shtetl in Poland and Romania and Belarus, checking the Torah scrolls in each holy ark? They would unfurl the supple parchment and study each and every letter, each one painstakingly and meticulously drawn in the ways of the ancient practice, holding within it such depth, symbolism, and history. Did you know there were 600,000 Jews at the giving of the Torah, and the Torah itself has 600,000 letters, one for every Jew who was present at Revelation? If even one of our ancestors had been missing at Mount Sinai, the Torah could not have been given. Similarly, should even one letter become faded or illegible, the whole Torah scroll is prohibited from use in the synagogue. What does this teach us? That revelation wasn't only about what God gave to us, but it was about the presence of those 600,000 who each brought their own perspective and insight, who each then carried both the significant obligation and great opportunity to teach and disseminate Torah to their community, their children, and their children's children. Each member of Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, now holds this sacred purpose to be like those scribes, to restore the faded letters among us to full strength and vitality, so that we can all together merit the awesome gift of revelation. I loved reading this touching story from my Zadie's collection of Shavuot literature, and not only because he highlighted it and bookmarked it, but because it offers a gentle and insightful framework for how we ought to approach this whole project of Shavuot, this miraculous and somewhat ineffable holiday when we relive Revelation. Yesterday, if we had been together here in the sanctuary, we would have risen together as one, opening our ears to the timeless words of the Ten Commandments, closing our eyes to imagine the rolling thunder, piercing shofar blasts, and trembling ground. We would have hearkened back to the moment when our ancestors, newly liberated slaves, received the remarkable gifts of law and divine relationship, a path forward toward holiness and justice. And we would have wondered, as we do every year at this time, how it is that we continue to hear God's voice, how it is that we continue to enter into conversation with God's word, how it is that we hone our tradition just as we are honed by it in every generation. But this story thinks about renewing revelation in a different way, turned outward toward each and every member of the Jewish people, seeing ourselves as vessels for wisdom and connection and truth, seeing our potential to reach out and to lift up our sisters and brothers. It is true that a Torah requires all 600,000 letters to be intact and valid. It is also true that revelation and continuing revelation requires the presence, intellect, voice, soul, and emotion of each and every person in our community. And when we search our hearts, we know that this is not only true in teaching and interpreting Torah, but that this is also true when we mourn a loss. The Talmud in Masechet Megillah asks, how many people are required to come together and mourn the passing of a Torah scholar? Rav Sheshet replies, as the Torah was given, so it should be taken away. Just as the Torah was given in the presence of 600,000 people, so too its taking should be done in the presence of 600,000. And then the Gemara comments, this applies to someone who read and studied Torah just for his own edification, but for someone who taught others, there is no limit to the honor that should be bestowed. And as we all know well, each and every person we lose was our teacher. Who is here today to remember the people who brought you into the world, who raised you, who taught you their most important lessons? And who is here today to remember the person who taught you how to have a real conversation, or how to ask a question, or how to learn? Who is here today to remember the person who taught you how to make challah, or kugel, or how to change a light bulb, or a tire, or to open a bank account? Who is here to remember the person who taught you how to love, how to save, how to plan, how to grow? Each and every person we bury is owed infinite honor. And this is why we are compelled to gather in great numbers to mourn our losses. We share their stories. We use our voices to rebuild and reconstitute the letters of our loved ones' Torah. Our memories provide the ink, our gathering, the parchment. Officiating at funerals and Shiva services is always heartbreaking. And in my experience over the last couple of months, I have felt a new sense of tragedy in the distinct loneliness of our grief. I led a funeral a few weeks ago for a wonderfully sweet and kind man. His family was grateful for his long life and his inspiring legacy. We all wore masks. We remained at safe distances from one another. We wore gloves as we shoveled earth onto the casket. And finally, when I would have instructed guests to form two lines so that the mourners could walk between them and receive their comfort, I instead asked them to turn around and face the Zoom screen. I gave permission to those on the call to unmute themselves and allowed some time for the family to receive words of comfort. And then, stepping away, I couldn't hold it together anymore. The weeping that I can usually stuff until I'm in my car after the burial is over rose up in my chest and came out in waves. I have seen the power of mourning in community, the comfort that comes from being physically surrounded by generations of people who all knew this very, very special person. It doesn't reverse the loss, but it makes the whole experience easier to bear, because you know that in the room with you are dozens or hundreds or 600,000 other people who received this person's revelation. You don't have to remember every single moment and every single lesson, because everyone with you, shoulder to shoulder and heart to heart, can help you collect and assemble the ink and the quill and the parchment, and then the letters turn to sentences, and the sentences become paragraphs and chapters. Gathering together is the catalyst for recalling our most beloved memories. But what I see from our community, from the grieving folks who have suffered losses recently, is abundant faith and gratitude to their loved ones and family and community who steadfastly show up for them to share comfort and memory, to their shul staff who organize and lead minyanim and kaddish over Zoom, and to the miracle of the technology that allows people living in Dallas, New York, California, South Africa, and Israel to all daven together in one Zoom meeting room. I'm inspired by our community's continued resilience and nimbleness in the face of so many obstacles. We adapt, as we always have, and our revelation continues to radiate together, not just in swirly ink letters on parchment, but in boxes on a screen. Here's the rest of that story about the faded letters from my Zadie's Shavuot collection. The child is very moved by the parent's story, so he mentions it to his Rabbi in class the next day, who thought about it, stroked his chin, and then remarked, "My child, this parable is not quite accurate. Jews are not like letters of ink on parchment, because God forbid, ink can fade and parchment can fall into disrepair. Rather, they are like letters engraved on stone. Such characters never fade. They may accumulate dust and become unrecognizable, but all one needs to do is disperse the dirt, and the full letter is restored as it was originally." I'm not going to be like the Rabbi who rejects and reframes the beautiful metaphor that was so powerful for the parent and child in our story. There is great truth in imagining the lives of our loved ones revealed and collected in a sacred Torah scroll. But there is a reason why we carve our relatives' names into headstones, just as there was a reason why God and then Moshe inscribed the words of the Ten Commandments onto stone tablets, so that the strength of their wisdom, the depth of their love, and the power of their legacy will never erode away. Earlier this morning, as we rose for the Amidah, our intimate conversation with God, we called out to Tzur Yisrael, the Rock of Israel. We attest to God's great steadiness and permanence in the midst of a volatile and unpredictable world. And as we prepare ourselves to recall the stories of our loved ones who are no longer with us, I pray that God will be our rock in this holiest of moments, that when we open ourselves to receive the revelation of those who loved us and taught us, that we only have to envision God holding our memories inscribed in stone for all eternity.